Namaskar and welcome to Global Scan. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. This is your one-stop destination for a roundup of all major global developments of the week. Even as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken discusses deteriorating situation in Afghanistan with India, Taliban is forging new friendships with China. And after Afghanistan, United States is set to exit Iraq and its combat mission by 2021. The cradle of Arab Spring is in a state of flux again. Tunisian political crisis. I look at also how world's internet and technology giants have benefited from the pandemic. All that and more in Global Scan. Let's get started with the top stories. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken makes his first visit to India, meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi. PM welcomes US President Biden's strong commitment to strengthen the India-US strategic partnership. Blinken also holds talks with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, discusses COVID, Indo-Pacific, climate change and Afghanistan. China sides with the Taliban, hopes the group will put interests of Afghanistan first in pushing for an early peace and reconciliation, urges Taliban to cut its ties with the East Turkmenistan Islamic movement, which Beijing blames for terrorism and separatism. Lebanese Sunni tycoon Najib Mikati becomes country's new Prime Minister designate, receives 72 votes out of a total of 118 members of parliament, says first priority would be to implement a reform plan by former colonial power France. Riding on COVID-induced pandemic situation, tech giants across the world register huge profits as increase in work from home and digital interface works to their advantage. International Monetary Fund maintains 6% global growth forecast for 2021, upgrading its outlook for United States and other wealthy economies. A huge thumbs up for the Indian economy and its resilient nature. IMF maintains India's ability to outperform all economies for 2 successive years. Let's begin with news from Asia. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken's India visit covered various sectors of cooperation, including response to COVID challenge, defense, security, trade, investment, addressing the climate change as well. Blinken met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and NSA Ajit Doval. Focus of talks revolved around the Afghan situation, Indo-Pacific Quad cooperation. Blinken stressed that if the Taliban wants recognition in the world, they will have to respect human rights. Here's more.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had a power-packed day in New Delhi, with several engagements focusing on a variety of issues. He called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Prime Minister in a tweet said, and I quote, "Good to meet US Secretary of State Secretary Blinken today. I welcome President Biden's strong commitment to strengthen the India-US strategic partnership, which is anchored in our shared democratic values and is a force for global good." Blinken had several engagements focusing on a variety of issues. Also held talks with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and discussed COVID, Indo-Pacific, climate change and Afghanistan. Addressing a joint press conference, the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said that the world wishes to see an independent, sovereign, democratic and stable Afghanistan. India stressed that the peace negotiations have to be taken seriously by all the parties. Afghanistan must neither be home to terrorism nor a source of refugees.
Regarding Afghanistan, it is essential that peace negotiations are taken seriously by all parties. The world wishes to see an independent, sovereign, democratic and stable Afghanistan, at peace with itself and with its neighbors. But its independence and sovereignty will only be ensured if it is free from malign influences. Similarly, unilateral imposition of will by any party will obviously not be democratic and can never lead to stability. The gains to Afghan civil society, especially on the rights of women, minorities, and on social freedoms, over the last 2 decades are self-evident. We must collectively work to preserve them. Afghanistan must neither be home to terrorism nor a source of refugees.
Blinken also stressed that if the Taliban wants recognition in the world, they will have to respect human rights. He said that taking over the country by force and abusing the rights of the people is not the right path to achieve this.
The Taliban says that it seeks international recognition, that it wants international support for Afghanistan. Presumably it wants its leaders to be able to travel freely in the world, sanctions lifted, etc. Well, the taking over the country by force and abusing the rights of its people is not the path to achieve those objectives.
Focusing on the Indo-Pacific region, Jaishankar also said that the Indo-Pacific presents a different set of challenges to stability, growth and prosperity. Adding to this, Antony Blinken also highlighted that the partnership will be critical in delivering stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond.
The Indo-Pacific presents a different set of challenges to stability, growth and prosperity. Under the aegis of the Quad framework, we are engaged on maritime security, HADR, counter-terrorism, connectivity and infrastructure, cyber and digital concerns, COVID-19 response, climate action, education, and resilient and reliable supply chains. Our ability to work more closely, bilaterally, in the Quad and elsewhere benefits the international community as a whole.
President Biden feels a deep personal commitment to making our friendship with India as strong and as effective as it can be. We believe this partnership will be critical for delivering stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, and for showing the world how democracies can deliver for their people. And we believe that there's a good deal that we can accomplish together on so many fronts, including in the near term.
Thanking India for its support to the U.S. during the early days of the COVID in the United States, Blinken announced that the U.S. government will send an additional $25 million support for vaccination efforts across India. Earlier in the day, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also met the NSA Ajit Doval, where strategic issues of importance in security, defense, economic and technology-related sectors were discussed.
Though the entire gamut of the bilateral relationship was discussed, but Afghanistan was in key focus in the conversations today, with the External Affairs Minister pointing out and insisting that unilateral imposition will not lead to stability in Afghanistan. With cameraman S. Jaishankar, Amritpal Singh, DD India.
Let us now take a look at the highlights of Antony Blinken's India visit, the issues that remained in focus for India and United States, beginning with assessing the Afghanistan situation. Leaders agree India and United States have come closer than ever before on the situation in Afghanistan, with both sides agreeing that violence or a power grab will not lead to stability there. Any future government in Afghanistan has to be inclusive and fully representative of the Afghan people. An Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process was the matter in focus. Let's move on to the next point, the Quad grouping and the Indo-Pacific. Biden administration, by putting the Quad grouping of nations at the centerpiece of the Indo-Pacific strategy, has re-emphasized India's strategic position in the region, key alliance in the Indo-Pacific with Japan and Australia. The two sides also spoke about the Quad initiative to provide India-made vaccines in the Indo-Pacific region. And Blinken also specified that Quad should not be seen as a military alliance. The goal is to reinforce international rules in the region. Let's move on to the next point, between India and the United States, the priorities, cooperation on the COVID management front. On coronavirus pandemic, leaders said United States and India are partnering to strengthen the global response to COVID-19 and on issues ranging from addressing infectious disease outbreaks to strengthening health systems to securing global supply chains. And thanking India for its support to the United States during early days of COVID-19, Blinken announced that United States government will send an additional support for vaccination efforts across India. India also thanked Biden administration for keeping the raw material supply chains open for further vaccine production. Moving on, the final point, but equally significant, shared democratic values. The two nations acknowledged that strong commitment to strengthen the India-US strategic partnership is anchored in our shared democratic values and is a force for global good. The leader said there are few relationships in the world that are more vital than the one between the US and India. We are two of the world's leading democracies, and diversity fuels our national strength. So those were some of the key focus areas as far as the talks between India and the United States were concerned in this visit of US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Now, peace talks notwithstanding, the situation in Afghanistan remains tenuous. As Army Chief had to postpone India visit due to intensified fighting on the ground with the Taliban. United Nations has said civilian casualties were at a record level in the war-torn country in May to June period. United States military commander in charge of the area has said it will keep giving air support to Afghan forces against the Taliban. It's not clear if it will go on even after United States forces completely exit Afghanistan by August 10th.
There seems to be no end to crisis in Afghanistan. Civilian casualties increasing, people are fearing for their life, but there is no one to hear their voice. The country has been marred by heavy clashes in the past 2 months as the Taliban launched major offensives, taking rural districts, border crossings and surrounding provincial capitals, prompting Afghan and US forces to carry out airstrikes to try and push back the insurgents. Negotiators have been meeting in Qatar's capital of Doha in recent weeks, but all in vain. According to United Nations, nearly 2,400 Afghan civilians were killed or injured in May and June as fighting between Taliban insurgents and Afghan security forces escalated, the highest number for those 2 months since records stated in 2009. The United Nations Assistance Mission to Afghanistan said in a report it had documented 5,183 civilian casualties between January and June, of which 1,659 were deaths. The number was up 47% from the same period last year. The figures underscored the dire situation for Afghan civilians as intense fighting picked up in May and June after US President Joe Biden announced American troops would withdraw by September, bringing an end to 20 years of foreign military presence in the country. The United States has offered more air support to Afghan troops amid Taliban offensive.
The United States has increased airstrikes in the support of Afghan forces over the last several days, and we're prepared to continue this heightened level of support in the coming weeks if the Taliban continue their attacks. We continue to provide contract maintenance and logistics support here in Kabul to maintain Afghan defense capabilities, including their aviation capability. Obviously, I think the Taliban probably would like to conduct an operation against Kabul. I think they will find it much harder than when they came here in the mid-90s. It's a much larger urban area. I think there are a lot more people here. I think the true nature and ferocity of Taliban rule is actually known to Afghans in a way that it wasn't known before. So I don't think it'll be the same thing that happened in the mid-1990s, should that occur.
Afghan Army Chief General Wali Muhammad Ahmadzai has postponed a visit to India this week because of the offensive by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Afghan authorities imposed a nighttime curfew across 31 of the country's 34 provinces to curb surging violence unleashed by a sweeping Taliban offensive in recent months. US President Joe Biden on Friday authorized up to $100 million from an emergency fund to meet unexpected urgent refugee needs stemming from the situation in Afghanistan, including for Afghan special immigration visa applicants. Insecurity has been growing in Afghanistan, largely spurred by fighting in its provinces as foreign troops withdraw and Taliban insurgents launch major offensives, taking districts and border crossings. Recent territorial gains by the Taliban come as foreign troops led by the US military withdraw from Afghanistan after 20 years of war, leaving the task of pulling the country from a spiraling security crisis to local forces. With Bureau Inputs, DD India.
Meanwhile, China on Wednesday hosted a rare 9-member Taliban delegation amid its recent ascendancy in Afghanistan, with Foreign Minister Wang Yi describing the group as a pivotal military and political force in the country. The visit to China is the first from the Taliban group in the wake of its gaining key grounds in Afghanistan. What's driving Beijing's outreach to the Taliban? Find out in the next report.
The civilian casualties are rising in Afghanistan with every passing day, and China is closing up to the Taliban. China hopes that the Afghan Taliban will put the interests of the country and the nation first in pushing for early substantive results in the peace and reconciliation process. State Councillor Wang Yi even said that the Afghan Taliban is an important military and political force in Afghanistan and is expected to play an important role in the country's peace, reconciliation and reconstruction process, according to the spokesperson. 9 Taliban representatives, led by the Taliban's chief negotiator and co-founder Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, met Foreign Minister Wang Yi in the northern Chinese city of Tianjin on a 2-day visit during which the peace process and security issues were discussed. China had urged Taliban to cut ties with East Turkestan Islamic movement, which is blamed by Beijing for terror activities and fueling separatism in Xinjiang region. This is the first time a senior Taliban leader has visited China since the group launched an offensive to capture territories across Afghanistan in the aftermath of the rapid withdrawal of US and NATO forces. According to Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wang told the Taliban delegation that China hopes the insurgent group will play a critical role in reconstruction of Afghanistan in the backdrop of US forces leaving that country. And in response to this, Baradar said that the Taliban is willing to establish an inclusive political structure in Afghanistan which protects human rights as well as the rights and interests of women and children. Observers say both China and Taliban are seeking each other's support for pragmatic reasons, despite very little in common ideologically. China is worried about unrest in western Xinjiang province and wants to minimize the effect of East Turkestan Islamic movement with the help of Taliban, and Taliban wants to gather China's support for its aspirations to capture power in Kabul. Mullah Baradar termed Beijing as a trustworthy friend and assured that his group will not permit any force to use Afghanistan's territory reportedly. China has also been engaging with Pakistan recently to exert influence on Taliban in an effort to get their support to cut ETIM in the region, but is also trying to balance its ties with the current Afghan regime, which is in deep struggle with the Taliban offensive. Clashes between the Taliban and the government forces have intensified as the US-led international forces have been withdrawing. The Taliban have captured several districts and border crossings in the north and west. The Islamist militants ruled Afghanistan from 1996 until they were ousted in 2001, weeks after the September 11 attacks on the United States. They have fought since to expel foreign forces and topple the government in Kabul. Recent territorial gains by the Taliban come as foreign troops led by the US military withdraw from Afghanistan after 20 years of war, leaving the task of pulling the country from a spiraling security crisis to local forces. World Today Desk, DD India.
Billionaire telecoms tycoon Najib Mikati has been named as Lebanon's new Prime Minister with 72 votes in the parliament. Mikati, in a speech following his appointment, called upon all political parties to cooperate with him on finding the right solutions to the nation's crisis. The new PM said first priority would be to implement a reform plan by former colonial power, France.
The political crisis in Lebanon comes to an end. This time, a Lebanese businessman, Najib Mikati, has secured enough votes in the parliamentary consultations on the 26th of July to be designated the next Prime Minister. He received 72 votes out of a total of 118 members of the parliament. But now, he faces the difficult challenge of forming a viable government to tackle a financial crisis. This is not the first time that Mikati will become Prime Minister. He was the Prime Minister twice before. He does not represent a political bloc or hail from a dynasty.
With signs that hint at the possibility of forming a government, we don't know if it works out or not. It is normal for the bloc to support and to encourage this possibility. That is why we named Najib Mikati as Prime Minister designate to reflect our commitment to the priority of forming a government.
Mikati said he was confident he could form a government, and its first priority would be to implement a reform plan by former colonial power, France.
Alone, I don't have a magic wand and I cannot perform miracles. We are in a very tough situation, and all of you know it. The man here asked me why I am sad. It is surely a difficult mission, but it will be successful if we work all together hand in hand. I know it is a difficult step, but I tell you I am assured. I have been studying situation for a while, and if I didn't have the required international guarantees and that someone must lead the fire extinguishing, I would not have taken this step.
The French roadmap envisioned a government of specialists capable of implementing reforms and engaging the International Monetary Fund. Hezbollah, the heavily armed Shiite Islamist movement that the United States deems a terrorist group, nominated Mikati in Monday's consultations. Most of the main parliamentary blocs endorsed the choice. Hezbollah is an ally of President Michel Aoun. The news of Mikati's likely designation boosted the Lebanese pound earlier on Monday on the unofficial parallel market, where dollars changed hands at around 16,500 pounds compared to over 22,000 at the height of the deadlock over the government. In Lebanon's political system, the post of Prime Minister has to be held by a Sunni Muslim, while the presidency is held by a Maronite Christian. DD India.
And let's now move to news from Americas. United States President Joe Biden has fired a warning salvo at adversaries that cyber attacks have the potential to lead to a real shooting war between major nations. His comments came as cyber attacks have riled United States way beyond companies that were initially targeted. Biden's comments were directed primarily at Russia. Tensions continue to simmer between the two nations as U.S. forces also engaged in a military drill in Ukraine, Russia's neighbor with a history of land disputes with it.
Cybersecurity issues and other matters are increasing tensions between the US on one side and China and Russia on the other. Now the matters seem to have crossed a certain threshold for US to issue a warning shot. US President Joe Biden has warned that a significant cyber attack on the United States could lead to a real shooting war with a major power. Comments that highlight what Washington sees as growing threats possessed by Russia and China. Biden made the remark during a visit to the office of the Director of National Intelligence in McLean, Virginia. Cybersecurity has risen to the top of the agenda for the Biden administration after a series of high-profile attacks on entities hurt the US far beyond just the companies hacked. Some of the attacks affected fuel and food supplies in parts of the United States.
But I think it's more likely we're going to end up, if we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence. And it's increasing exponentially, the capabilities. When I was with Mr. Putin, who has a real problem, he's sitting on top of an economy that has nuclear weapons and oil wells and nothing else. Nothing else. Their economy is what, the 8th smallest in the world now? Largest in the world? He knows he's in real trouble, which makes him even more dangerous in my view.
Biden's remarks were directed primarily at Russia, and he referred to Russian President Vladimir Putin with apparent sarcasm as my very close friend. Biden also accused Russia of spreading disinformation about the 2022 American midterm elections, which he said was a pure violation of our sovereignty.
And I just had an interesting meeting, as you all know, with my very close friend Vladimir Putin. I can tell, the one thing, I've been dealing with world leaders a long, long time. And just like all of you women and men, you can sort of sense somebody else after a while. He knows that you're better than his team. And it bothers the hell out of him. Not a joke. Not a joke.
The threats of retaliation against cyber attacks are not the only issue that is literally pitting the superpowers against each other across the line in Ukraine. The roar of attack helicopters, armored personnel firing by soldiers is echoing a different buzz in the region. The diplomatic and strategic message intended by this large military exercise hosted by Ukraine and also involving the United States, Poland and Lithuania is not lost on anyone. The drills, called the Three Swords 2021, will involve more than 1,200 servicemen and more than 200 combat vehicles and will last from July 17th to 30th in Lviv region. The drills come amid increased tensions between NATO and Moscow, which said in June it had fired warning shots and dropped bombs in the path of a British warship to chase it out of Black Sea waters off the coast of Crimea. Relations between Kyiv and Moscow plummeted after Russia seized Crimea and over Russia's support for separatist forces in the conflict in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region. Ukraine and the United States in June held a separate military exercise, Sea Breeze, involving more than 30 countries in the Black Sea and southern Ukraine, despite Russian calls for the drills to be cancelled. DD India.
Moving on, US President Joe Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi sealed an agreement this week, formally ending US combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021. But American forces will still operate there in an advisory role. The agreement comes at a politically delicate time for the Iraqi government and could be a boost for Baghdad. Kadhimi has faced increasing pressure from the Iran-aligned parties and paramilitary groups who oppose the US military role in the country.
US President Joe Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi on 26th of July sealed an agreement formally ending the US combat mission in Iraq by the end of 2021, more than 18 years after US troops were sent to the country. The announcement came after Biden held talks with Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi at the White House.
We support strengthening Iraq's democracy, and we're anxious to make sure the election goes forward in October. And we're also committed to our security cooperation. Our shared fight against ISIS is critical for the stability of the region, and our counterterrorism cooperation will continue even as we shift to this new phase we're going to be talking about.
Today our relation is stronger than ever. Our partnership exists for economy, the environment, health, education, culture, and more. I'm looking forward to work with you, Mr. President, to bring our two countries more closer for benefit of Iraq and United States. God bless our two countries.
The US presence in Iraq has become a major issue since top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and the leader of an Iran-backed Shia Muslim militia were killed in a US-owned strike in the capital Baghdad last year. Coupled with Biden's withdrawal of the last American forces in Afghanistan by the end of August, the Democratic president is completing US combat missions in the two wars that the then President George W. Bush began under his watch. A US-led coalition invaded Iraq in March 2003 based on the charges that the then Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's government possessed weapons of mass destruction. Saddam was ousted from power, but such weapons were never found. In recent years, the US mission was dominated by helping defeat Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. DD India.
Let's now move to news from Africa. Tunisia's president has pushed the country's fledgling democracy into further crisis. Over the weekend, President Kais Saied fired the country's prime minister and suspended the parliament in what his political opponents have called a coup. But he says the move was justified after thousands of Tunisians took to the streets in the recent days to protest the government's handling of the pandemic, which has deepened the nation's economic woes.
Major political crisis in Tunisia. President dismissed the government and froze parliament on July 25, prompting huge crowds to fill the capital in his support. But his opponents termed the move a coup. The country was witnessing unrest for quite some time over the government's handling of the COVID-19 and economic and social turmoil. President Kais Saied said he would assume executive authority with the assistance of a new prime minister in the biggest challenge yet to a 2014 democratic constitution that split powers between the president, prime minister and parliament.
After consultation took place with the prime minister and the speaker of the parliament, Article 80 of the constitution was implemented and a number of decisions. The first decision is to freeze all the powers of parliament. The constitution does not allow its dissolution, but it does not stand in the way of freezing all of its activities. The second decision is to lift the immunity of all the members of parliament. The third decision is that the president assumes the executive authority with the help of a government headed by the prime minister and appointed by the president of the republic.
Just after the announcement, a large crowd flooded Tunis to celebrate. Crowds numbering in the tens of thousands stayed on the streets of Tunis and other cities, with some people setting off fireworks for hours after Said's announcement as helicopters circled overhead.
Regarding this decision, it's the first time in my life I've heard a head of state take a correct decision. We have taken back our country. This is the first time I've gone out to the streets to celebrate.
Tunisian President Kais Saied also joined a crowd in the street in central Tunis early on July 26 that was celebrating his decision to oust government and freeze parliament. Pictures released by his office showed Saied arrived to meet jubilant supporters who had filled the central Habib Bourguiba Avenue, the very street where the biggest protests took place in 2011 during a revolution whose own democratic legacy now hangs in the balance. Thousands of people, including many families, walked along the tree-lined avenue, raising national flags, dancing and lighting red flares. Tunisia's military stopped Parliament Speaker Rachid Ghannouchi from entering the Parliament building on July 26 after President Saeed declared he had frozen the body's activities. In the early hours of Monday, Ghanouchi arrived at Parliament where he said he would call a session in defiance of Saeed. But the army stationed outside the building stopped the 80-year-old former political exile from entering.
Today we are surprised by supreme decisions that not only surprise Ennahda but also surprise the Tunisian people and the world in a country that is proud of being the first Arab democracy and having the latest constitution announcing decisions that are essentially a coup d'etat, and it is called nothing but a coup.
Years of paralysis, corruption, declining state services and growing unemployment had already soured many Tunisians on their political system before the COVID-19 pandemic hammered the economy last year and coronavirus infection rates shot up this summer. President Kais Saied said he would assume executive authority with the assistance of a new prime minister in the biggest challenge yet to the democratic system Tunisia introduced in a 2011 revolution. With Bureau Inputs, DD India.
And let's now get a global weather update. United States, Europe, South Asia, they're all facing nature's fury. In Germany, more than 170 people died in last week's flooding. It was Germany's worst natural disaster in more than half a century. More in this report.
The extreme weather triggered by climate change is affecting the world. Nature's fury can be witnessed across the globe. From east to west, almost every country in the world is facing devastating impact of climate change, be it the raging wildfires of California or parts of Europe, submerged in water, or heavy rainfall and landslides in India. Deadly flooding ravaged parts of Europe, with Germany being hit the hardest. Extreme weather gripping northern Italy flooded the town of Chernobyl after storms battered the picturesque Lake Como, a popular holiday destination for tourists. Residents were seen removing debris in front of a church as more than 60 people were evacuated after the towns surrounding the lake were hit by mudslides and floods. The bad weather comes after a weekend of fires and hot weather in the south of Italy that were particularly devastating on the island of Sardinia. In Bangladesh, 6 Rohingya Muslims, including children, were killed and many injured after heavy monsoon rains triggered landslides and flooding in refugee camps. Heavy rains are expected to continue for the next few days in Bangladesh. Rohingya refugees mostly live in shacks made of bamboo and plastic sheets that cling to steep, bare hills, and flooding has further worsened their living conditions. On the other hand, California's biggest wildfire has incinerated more than 190,000 acres in Northern California. A fire scorching parts of Northern California's Butte County has ballooned into the state's largest wildfire. The officials warned that smoke columns could spawn lightning storms capable of igniting more fires. The swarming Dixie Fire gained ground on Saturday and with only 21% contained as of Sunday morning. Another wildfire tore through small towns nestled in a wooded area north of Athens, spurred by high winds which damaged several homes. Plumes of billowing dark smoke were seen rising above houses. Fortunately, there were no reports of deaths or injuries. In China, a sandstorm as high as 100 meters engulfed northwestern cities. The sandstorm turned the sky yellow and reduced the visibility to less than 5 meters in some areas. Due to this, the local people had to impose traffic controls on cities' highways and directed stranded vehicles to leave dangerous zones. Monsoon mayhem is also being witnessed in India. Initially, it was a major relief for Delhiites from sultry weather conditions, as several parts of the national capital received rainfall, but gradually the rainfall increased, affecting normal life. According to the IMD, a thunderstorm with light to moderate intensity rain is likely in many parts of Delhi NCR. Climate change has led to extreme rainfall, causing deadly flooding across western Maharashtra and parts of India as well. The death toll in Maharashtra has risen. In Himachal Pradesh, known for its tourism, 9 people died and 7 went missing in flash floods of Kulu and Lahore Spiti districts. In another incident, a landslide occurred on Vikas Nagar Pantaghati Road in Shimla. No casualties have been reported in the incident. Scientists had already warned that climate change will lead to extreme weather conditions resulting in heavier downpours and drought-like conditions, and that it could lead to more disasters. With Bureau Inputs, DD India.
Let's now get you some more news from the world of economy. The global COVID crisis forced economies to pause and present businesses with a unique opportunity to use challenges to their benefit. Now, with everyone staying at home, tech giants have flourished as they turn the crisis into an opportunity. With technology and digital reach enhanced via ads, tech giants like Google, Apple have gained in quantity of business and profits as a direct consequence. Here's how.
The COVID-19 pandemic might have hurt economies worldwide, but the tech companies have been unaffected. On the contrary, due to increased insistence on work from home and digital interface, their revenues have soared. The US tech companies are leading the bunch. Huge tech companies Apple and Alphabet, Google's parent company, have reported quarterly results that have beaten analysts' expectations. Fueled by a rise in advertising spending, as more consumers shopped online, Google's parent Alphabet's quarterly revenue and profit surged to record highs. Shares of Alphabet rose 5% in extending trading. Alphabet said revenue from Google advertising rose nearly 70% to $50.44 billion. Ad revenue for the company's streaming video platform YouTube jumped 83.7% from the year-ago quarter to $7 billion as advertisers continued to use the site to reach viewers at home amid the pandemic. Total revenue of the internet's biggest supplier of search and video ads rose 61.6% to $61.88 billion, well above Wall Street estimates of $56.16 billion. Meanwhile, Apple just posted its strongest June quarter ever, with a near doubling of profits and a huge revenue beat for its iPhone business. Apple gained as consumers bought premium versions of its 5G iPhones and signed up for the company's subscription services. Driven by better than expected iPhone sales, total revenue hit $81.43 billion, which was above analyst expectations of $73.30 billion. The digital ad market is booming, with consumers shifting to shopping largely online because of the coronavirus pandemic, leading companies to rely on data gathered from customers' orders and online activity to launch new products and know their market better. DD India.
And the International Monetary Fund on Tuesday maintained its 6% global growth forecast for 2021, upgrading its outlook for the United States and other wealthy economies. It also maintained India's ability to outperform all economies for 2 successive years. The divergence is based largely on better access to COVID vaccines and continued fiscal support in advanced economies, while emerging markets face difficulties on both fronts.
Access to vaccines has emerged as a major factor for economies struggling due to COVID-19 induced measures. The nations that can manage mass inoculations and cope with the surge will have a better chance of bouncing back on the economic front. The International Monetary Fund has maintained a 6% global growth forecast for 2021, upgrading its outlook for the United States and other wealthy economies, but cutting estimates for a number of developing countries struggling with surging COVID-19 infections. The divergence is based largely on better access to COVID-19 vaccines and continued fiscal support in advanced economies, while emerging markets face difficulties on both fronts, the IMF said in an update to its World Economic Outlook.
Now, these revisions reflect, to an important extent, differences in pandemic developments as the Delta variant takes over. Now, close to 40% of the population in advanced economies has been fully vaccinated, compared with 11% in emerging market economies and a tiny fraction in low-income developing countries. Faster than expected vaccination rates and return to normalcy have led to upgrades, while renewed waves of COVID-19 cases in some countries, notably India, have led to downgrades.
The IMF significantly raised its forecast for the United States, which it now expects to grow at 7% in 2021 and 4.9% in 2022, up 0.6 and 1.4 percentage points respectively from the forecasts in April. The projections assume the US Congress will approve President Joe Biden's roughly $4 trillion in proposed infrastructure, education and family support spending, largely as envisioned by the White House. Despite the pandemic-induced lockdowns and restrictions, IMF has maintained the resilience of India's economy as it expects India to be among the fastest-growing economies for 2 consecutive fiscals, that's 2021-22 and 2022-23. the strong response to COVID pandemic, and India's solid presence in pharma and vaccine manufacturing seem to be the key factors that have worked for the Indian economy. DD India.
On to some sports news. India's star weightlifter Mirabai Chanu created history as she overcame her Rio heartbreak to become the first Indian weightlifter to win the silver medal at the Olympic Games. Chanu also became the first Indian to win an Olympic
Mirabai Chanu won India's first medal at Tokyo Olympics with a silver in women's 49 kg weight category in weightlifting. The Indian lifted a total of 202 kg to finish second to China's Hou Zihoi, who won the gold with an Olympic record of 210 kgs. Mirabai becomes the second Indian to win an Olympic medal in weightlifting after Karnam Malleswari's historic bronze in 2000 Sydney Olympics. The world number 3 started with successful lifts of 84 kg and 87 kg in the snatch to make the perfect start to her quest for a podium finish. The 26-year-old, though failed in her third snatch attempt of 89 kgs, however, her first two lifts were enough to see her be in the second position after the snatch. A world record holder in clean and jerk in women's 49 kg weight category, Mirabai was in a good position to finish on the podium once she did well in the snatch category, and Mirabai did not disappoint. The Indian made a successful attempt of 110 kg to start off before an incredible second lift of 115 kg. In the third attempt, in an attempt to push her limits, Mirabai failed to lift 117 kg but still did enough to win a silver medal at the Tokyo Games. It's been a remarkable turnaround for Mirabai, who could not finish the event at Rio Olympics 5 years ago. But fast forward to the year 2021, Rio seems like a long forgotten memory, perhaps even a memory from a different life. She is a weightlifter reborn.
मेरा सपना थी हमारी ये ओलंपिक का मेडल लेना, तो आज पूरा हो गया है। तो सपना तो रियो ओलंपिक से भी हमने किया था। रियो ओलंपिक के लिए हमने बहुत ही तैयारी की थी, बहुत मेहनत किया था। तो उसी दिन मेरा दिन नहीं थे, तो इसलिए मैं मेडल नहीं ले पाया। तो उसी से मैं बहुत सारी सीखी हूँ। मेरा टेक्निक, मेरा ट्रेनिंग बहुत सारे चेंज किया है हमने, बहुत मेहनत किया था। तो उसी से हमने पूरा सोचा था मैं कुछ कर सकती हूँ, मैं आगे और भी ज़्यादा अच्छा करके दिखाऊंगी। तो इसी वजह से मैं आज जो मैंने रियो में नहीं कर पाया था, इसको पूरा कवर मैंने इसी टोक्यो ओलंपिक में मेडल लेके मैंने करा। तो हम बहुत मेहनत किया, बहुत सारी हमने टेक्निक, सभी ट्रेनिंग में बहुत सारे चेंज किया हमने। तो मैं बता नहीं सकती, पर मैं बहुत ज़्यादा मेहनत किया था इसी तक मैं पहुँचने के लिए।
Mirabai Chanu was all of 12 when she ventured into the hills to collect firewood. Hailing from a poor stratum of society in the town of Nongpong Kangching, about 20 kilometers from the city of Imphal in the state of Manipur, it was one of the means of livelihood for the family. On one such trip, her elder brother was not able to lift a bundle of firewood on his head. It was then Mirabai Chanu, the youngest among 6 siblings, managed to lift it with much ease and walked back home some 2 kilometers away. 8 years later, that gold bagged the silver medal at the 2014 Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, ushering the rise of a champion. In 2017, she created history at the World Weightlifting Championships held in United States when she became only the second Indian in 22 years to clinch a gold at the World Weightlifting Championships. Karnam Malleswari has achieved this feat twice. In 2018, Chanu lifted a total of 196 kg, 86 kg in snatch and 110 kg in clean and jerk to win the first gold medal for India in the Commonwealth. In 2019, at the Asian Weightlifting Championships, she won bronze in clean and jerk in the 49 kg category. The total weight of 199 kg was her best then. In 2021, she went past the 200 kg barrier at the Asian Championships, and in Tokyo she has lived up to her promise by winning a silver medal at the Tokyo Olympic Games. Sports Desk, DD India.
Time now to turn on the time machine and look at the importance of this week in history.
It was on July 12th in the year 1920 that Panama Canal was formally opened. 6 years after the first ship sailed through it. Panama Canal is an 82 kilometers long artificial waterway in Panama. Panama connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. The canal is now used by over 14,000 ships every day. On the same day in the year 1997, young activist Malala Yousafzai was born in Pakistan. Malala was shot in 2012 by a Taliban gunman in an assassination attempt in retaliation of her activism. Malala won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014 at the age of 17 and became the youngest recipient of the award. United Nations has declared July 12th as Malala Day in honor of the young activist. It was on 13 July in the year 1930, the first Soccer World Cup began in Montevideo, Uruguay, with 13 teams taking part in the World Cup. The first matches were between France and Mexico and United States and Belgium simultaneously. July 14th marked one of the darkest days in the history of France when in 2016 a truck driver plowed into a large crowd watching firework display in Nice to mark Bastille Day holiday. Around 86 people including children were killed while scores of others were injured, making it one of the deadliest terror attacks in France. On July 15th in the year 2006, social media site Twitter was launched. Twitter was created by Jack Dorsey, Noah Glass, Biz Stone and Ivan Williams in March 2006 and was launched in July. An event that shaped the history of space travel. On July 16th in 1969, NASA's Apollo 11 spacecraft took off on its historic mission to land men on the moon with astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins aboard. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Stories now from a more intimate world around us, stories that are beyond headlines.
UNESCO has added Madrid's historic Paseo del Prado Boulevard and Retiro Park to its list of World Heritage Sites. The tree-lined Paseo del Prado in the center of the Spanish capital is home to the Prado Museum, while Retiro Park just off the Paseo del Prado is one of the city's most visited attractions. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez was quick to celebrate the news, tweeting, "Deserved recognition for a space in the capital that enhances our historic, artistic and cultural legacy." An unusually large meteor briefly lit up southern Norway on Sunday, creating a spectacular sound and light display as it rumbled across the sky. According to Norwegian Meteor Network, the meteor traveled at 15 to 20 kilometers per second and lit up the night sky for about 5 to 6 seconds. The Norwegian Meteor Network is meanwhile analyzing other data to try to pinpoint the meteor's origin and destination. There was no immediate reports of injuries or damage. Vintage cars continue to the best attractions for all. With spectacular design and interiors, these cars are favorites of aficionado. Paris on Sunday hosted the 14th summer crossing where nearly 700 vintage, antique and classic cars flooded the streets of the France capital. Cars, motorbikes, buses and tractors from all over France and even other European countries participated in the annual event. They drove past iconic Parisian monuments including the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe or Montmartre's Sacré-Cœur Basilica. The 38th annual New Jersey Lottery Festival of Ballooning set off from Reddington, New Jersey, where crowds watched as over 100 colorful hot air balloons filled the sky. The clear sunny day and calm winds were ideal for flight as families enjoyed the festival that was returning after last year's event was cancelled because of the coronavirus pandemic. The New Jersey Division of Travel and Tourism says the annual festival is the largest summertime hot air balloon and music festival in North America. South Koreans celebrated the popular Boryong Mud Festival from their homes for a second year. The annual mud extravaganza became a mostly online celebration due to COVID-19, with offline programs scaled back and revelers from around the country enjoying mud pools and mud packs in their homes. The festival, held in the coastal town Boryong, 130 kilometers southwest of the capital, is South Korea's most popular festival for international visitors. The event typically attracts hundreds who flock to the beach for mud slides, mud wrestling and other revelry. The festival will continue until August 1st. The Van Gogh Alive, the experience has opened in Munich after being postponed a number of times due to COVID-19, with many calling it the best visited multimedia exhibit in the world with 6 million visitors to date. Featuring some of Van Gogh's best known works, the exhibition that also toured many other cities around the world is not only a feast for the eyes but also the senses, with music and smells to accompany the colourful projections. Is your feline friend looking a bit down in the dumps? Cats aren't the best at letting you know when something is wrong, but a new app powered by artificial intelligence claims it can decode the subtle facial cues of kitties to deliver a speedy assessment of their well-being. The app, called Tably, developed by Calgary-based developers, uses the pain assessment for cats based on ear position, orbital tightening or eye narrowing, muscle tension, whiskers change and head position to determine their mood. Who doesn't like a plate full of French fries? This dish made of potato has gained huge popularity over the years, so much so that a restaurant in New York is selling a special French fries covered in 23-karat gold dust for $200 per plate. Served at New York City's famous Serendipity 3 restaurant, these are the world's most expensive French fries according to the Guinness World Records. This is Serendipity's 10th Guinness World Record. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
And as we conclude this edition of Global Scan, we leave you with the images that made news this week. I'll take your leave. Namaskar.